Voters across the state came out in strong force yesterday to cast their vote for the 2024 general election, and now we have results to report. KNEB.TV News starts right now.
From your trusted source for news in western Nebraska and eastern Wyoming, this is KNEB.TV News. Presented by Platte Valley Companies, premier provider of financial services.
Hello, I'm Ryan Murphy. This is KNEB.TV News, powered by Platte Valley Companies. Thanks for joining me. In our top story, Donald J. Trump elected to his second term as President of the United States. That was the biggest watched race across the country, but so many other contested races statewide and locally. So let's just go right into those results. Well, we'll start our results with the Scottsbluff City Council. We'll have two fresh faces in the form of Jerry Stricker and Scott Phillips, as they were the two top vote getters, outgarnering Selena Lerma and Cassandra Lauder, running for the posts currently held by Angela Scanlon and Jordan Caldwell. And for those two propositions for the city of Scottsbluff, the first one, shall the city continue its sales and use tax currently imposed at 1.5% for the next decade? About 2-1 in favor of keeping that sales and use tax. That's a huge sigh of relief for city officials who use that for a lot of funding within town. And for Proposition 2, should the city continue an economic development program, their LB 840 program that they use also for another 10 years. Nearly 3,400 people in favor of keeping that program, while 1,700 people voting against it. And for the Alliance City Council for the full 4-year term, we have John McGehee and Travis Turman getting elected to the post. One of them already retained by McGehee. He'll be back for another term. Randall Hitchcock and Tamara Wood falling just a little bit short this year. And for Alliance City Council's 2-year term, it's going to be Jay Wiesgerber, who garnered about 40% of the votes in a field of 4. He edged out Russell Saito, Chuck Frisch, and Brenda Bishop for that 2-year term on the Alliance City Council. And in the Southern Panhandle for Sidney, we have 2 positions open for the Sidney City Council, and this was a tight race, but we have Burke Radcliffe and Robert J. Coons taking the seats, contested by Brian Fort and Brock Buckner Sr. And for the Potter Village Board, we have 4 candidates vying for 3 seats, and this year it's going to be Melanie Roter, Edward Revord, and Alicia Julfs taking those seats. Jerry Dynas getting edged out by those challengers. Heading back up to the Northern Panhandle, Chadron City Council, we have some fresh faces. 2 people going to get elected for running, and this year it's going to be Kevin Olsky and Clay Anderson, representing the people of Chadron on the City Council, edging out Lauren Bat-Poirier and Jesse Roberts. And Oshkosh has a new mayor as Terry Davis defeats Brandon Dreeling on a vote of 242 to 167. Davis garnering just about 60% of the votes. And for the Oshkosh City Council, we have Jeannie Schwartz as your top vote getter with nearly 40% of the votes. She'll be joined by Jaden Porter, incumbent, to serve on the City Council. In Oshkosh, their Proposition 1, shall the sales and use tax stay at 1%? Resoundingly yes. 65% say keep that in use for the next 10 years. And for Proposition 2, 70% say keep that economic development program currently in place. Only 122 people in Oshkosh voting against that prop. Minutair has a new mayor in the face of Carolyn Nelson, who defeats Frank Costa 58% to 41% of the votes. Meanwhile, over in Gordon, we have 2 new city council members, and Jared Peterson and Alyssa DeHart will be representing the people of Gordon for the next 4 years as they defeat Kelly Grant for those 2 seats on the Gordon City Council. Dan Kling elected to serve another term as a Sheridan County Commissioner, getting about 59% of the votes over Kevin Kim Rosane. Now let's look at some school boards. In Bayard, we have Kim Burry, Christina Masher, and Jessica Dankowski representing the Bayard School Board. In Mitchell, it's going to be Dustin Keener, Brad Helgerson, and Paul Pieper going on to represent the folks for the Mitchell School Board. They were elected, defeating Derek Perkins. In our next school board race, we of course have the Scottsbluff School Board, where all incumbents retain their seats. Scott Reisig, Beth Merrigan, and Paul Snyder, staving off challenger Reginald Preston for the Scottsbluff School Board. Bridgeport School Board, we have Kay Anderson, Ryan Amatis, and Linda Norman going on to represent the Bridgeport School Board in that race in Morrill County. Up in Sioux County, we have Lane Grotus, your top vote getter, getting 31% of the votes. Judson Skavdal and Jolene Falkenberg going on to represent the Sioux County School Board. In Garden County, it's going to be Matthew Artisono, Shelley Peterson, and Jared Lloyd going on to serve the Garden County School Board. For Goshen County School District, it was a close one for a while, but Dylan Hager went on to take about 57% of the votes, defeating Joe Meininger for the school board in Goshen County. Well, it was a close race early on, but Deb Fisher retains her seat in the U.S. Senate, getting about 53% of the votes over challenger Dan Osborne. Pete Ricketts had an easy victory over challenger Preston Love. He will serve out the remaining 2 years of former U.S. Senator Ben Sass' seat, as he will represent Nebraska in the U.S. Senate along with Deb Fisher. For the House of Representatives, Congressman Adrian Smith elected to his 10th consecutive term to serve Nebraska's vast 3rd congressional district. Challenger Daniel Ebers not even getting 20% of the votes this go-around. Adrian Smith elected to his 10th term in Congress. Here in the legislature, we have Tanya Storer representing District 43. That will be the former district held by Tom Brewer of Gordon. Tanya Storer defeating Tony Tangwall 60% to 40%. And representing District 47 will be Paul E. Stroman, taking the seat formerly held by Bayard Senator Steve Erdman. Larry Bollinger was the challenger, garnering about 23% of the votes. Paul Stroman getting a resounding 77% of the votes. Look at those statewide initiatives for abortion bans after the first trimester. 55% of the voters were in favor of the abortion ban this go-around. The counter to Initiative 434, provide a state constitutional right to abortion, they voted against that. And for 435, yes, to repeal the $10 million educational scholarship program. The voters of Nebraska said, let's repeal that law. And for referendum 436, required paid sick leave for employees, 74% of the voters were in favor of requiring employers to provide earned paid sick leave for employees. Bouncing over to Initiative 437 next, that's concerning medical marijuana, and the voters have spoken. They have voted to legalize the medical use of marijuana in the state of Nebraska. Almost 71% of the voters in favor of legalizing medical marijuana. In turn, Initiative 438 would create the Medical Cannabis Commission, which would regulate the state's medical marijuana program. 67% of the voters, roughly 545,000, voting in favor of establishing the Nebraska Medical Cannabis Commission, which will regulate the state's medical marijuana program. Looking at some Wyoming statewide election results, John Barrasso elected to another term in the U.S. Senate, defeating Democratic challenger Scott Morrow. For the Wyoming Congress seat, incumbent Harriet Hageman goes on for her second term, defeating challengers Kyle Cameron, Richard Brubaker, and Jeffrey Haggett. And for Wyoming Constitutional Amendment A, 60% of the voters in favor of Constitutional Amendment A. And a huge shout out to all of us in the KNEB newsroom. Scott Miller working on results throughout the evening. Bill Boyer, Trayton Harmon, Cardell Mackerel was at the Scottsbluff County Administration Building until about 3 a.m. trying to get those final results. Steve Chose, Dave Strang, myself, all putting in the extra hours to provide up-to-date election coverage. Very proud to be part of a team like that. We had a long Tuesday and early Wednesday morning, so we're going to leave it at that today. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Platte Valley Bank, for sponsoring our election results. Thank you for tuning in, sticking with us, and we'll be back with our regular newscast tomorrow.